Should the right abandon Reagan? This question is spurred by actually a few things that I have observed looking at politics over the past few years. Number one, it's spurred by the more populist direction the right in America has moved towards under the tutelage of Donald Trump. And by the way, I'm not demeaning this. I think that actually populism is the preferred alternative to the other worldview that it's currently contending with, which is this idea that internationalism and globalism must be the center of the nation. That is not true. A nation's sovereignty must be the first principle of all forms of political engagement on the international stage and on the domestic stage. I wish politicians in Washington actually knew that. If they knew that, I think that our country would be in much better shape. But that's a different story, different day. So this increase of populism has kind of upended the old assumptions that many Americans have about conservatism and proper political order. But also, beyond that, there's also been certain cultural things, certain cultural moments like immigration or other issues that normally wouldn't be touched upon in a small government administration that have also prompted a lot of people to ask, well, is Reagan still a valuable entity for us as conservatives to use as a hallmark for our ideas and our visions? And of course, the rise of what is called the post-liberal movement has kind of taken those facts and they've applied them for political and social capital to reject wholesale the legacy of Reagan and also reject wholesale the entire project of the United States, if you want my own opinion. I'll talk about that in a second. And so, and also, you see this reflected as well in the comments of some major commentators. So, for example, Charlie Kirk said, maybe we praise Reagan a little bit too much in reference to a tweet that he saw where Reagan is addressing the issue of immigration. Reagan also always gets hit hard on the issue of immigration from the right because he was very liberalized in his policies. He didn't have a very strict, hardline mindset that is oftentimes endemic to the right wing today on the issue of immigration. All of these things kind of just come together to make a perfect storm of people wanting to reject Reagan, reject his legacy, and so on and so forth. And in order to actually understand these arguments, you have to understand Reagan. And in order to actually understand Reagan, you have to understand the phenomena that produced Reagan. Now, the Reagan era was long before my time. I'm 23, so I'll be 24 in a few months, actually. Happy birthday to me, I guess. But the Reagan era is long before my time. Some of my viewers may have remembered when Reagan was president. I don't. My political consciousness started when I was about maybe 7 or 8 when Obama, ran for office, and then it matured around 2011, and it kept maturing throughout the 2016 presidential cycle. And then after that, I basically affixed myself to philosophy and political philosophy, and I began to contextualize things. So I never grew up under the Reagan era, but I have grown up under a Republican politics and a conservative politics that is influenced and informed by Reaganism. I have grown up with a Republican politics that has an emphasis on small government. I have grown up under Republican politics that has traditionally had an emphasis from the 80s onward on free marketeering. I have grown up in a Republican posture that has an emphasis on peace through strength. I have grown up seeing in several GOP presidential debates people invoking the Reagan commandment that you should not attack a fellow Republican as some kind of godlike thing. I've grown up under those things. So I guess, like many of other people who've grown up under these things as well, I've kind of inherited the spoil of the Reagan legacy. And the conditions that produced Reagan and the phenomenon that took him to success are very different from the conditions that we currently face in America in some ways, but in other ways they're the same. Here's my view. Ronald Reagan, in the context of an inspirational political figure who is attempting to beat the wiles of communism in an era where anti-communism is at the height of its popularity and Americanism is being reasserted on a global scale and on a local scale. In that context, Reagan is almost perfect. And it's for that reason that I actually admire Reagan on a deep level, because there are not many people who were able to speak to the heart of Americans and also speak to the mind of Americans about the threat of communism. This is why they call him the great communicator, because he was. There were a lot of complex ideas and rebuttals and agendas surrounding Reagan during his ascent to power. Many of you may remember that Reagan was shot up to the national stage when he made the brilliant speech, A Time for Choosing, in support of Barry Goldwater, who unfortunately did not win his election for president. I wish he would have. He would have been a brilliant president. And in that speech, he said that America is the last stand of freedom on earth. That kind of language and assertion of moral value in the context of a broader rhetorical goal was needed at the time, and it's generally just brilliant. But Reagan, being propelled by these ideas, became a marker, an avatar for these ideas. And so when Reagan didn't live up to these ideas during his presidency, what happened? What happened is a bunch of new epithets, rhetorical constructions, vain fascinations of academia, which littered into society and have tainted the thinkings of generation after generation, were created. Things like trickle-down economics, but which, by the way, is a myth. There's no such thing. No economist under Reagan proposed such thing. That's not even a technical term. That's an epithet which misunderstands the proper relationship between economic relationships and value produced. And it was a slur that was produced by Reagan deciding to cut taxes. The truth about trickle-down economics is, it's not that the taxes are cut and then the owner being able to keep more money benefits the worker. Oh, no. The moment taxes are cut, by definition, the worker will see the benefits sooner than the owner. There is no such thing as trickle-down economics. Thomas Sowell has a brilliant thing out on this that you guys should all look into. It's brilliant. But that's one of the epithets that was developed after the Reagan era. Another one, of course, beyond the sort of trickle-down economics, the Reaganomics, was the idea of neoliberalism, which also became in full force after the Reagan era. People saying that if you believe in a free market or something akin to a free market, you're a Reagan neoliberal, and so on and so forth. Well, the facts are very simple. Reagan didn't live up to the ideas that he came into office touting. He was not a free market conservative. He was a mixed economy conservative who prided and prized Social Security, Medicare, and defense spending over the needed austerity measures that would have actually gave better fiscal health to America in the 80s. And it's for this reason that David Stockman, his own budget person, relented against the administration and quit the administration, because he knew that you can't cut taxes and you can't cut some portions of spending without actually addressing the elephants in the room. Because if you cut taxes and keep spending level, or you increase it, well, the tax cuts will do absolutely nothing and your economy and government will get worse. Reagan, for various political reasons and sociological reasons, just didn't want to embrace this truth. Not only that, but Reagan was very much interventionist. Reagan had an intense focus on uprooting the Soviet Union and on funding proxy wars around the world in different areas of the world, not to preserve America in all reality, but to uproot the Soviet Union, which he may have viewed as preserving America, but he saw America's role not just to preserve itself, but to do something else. Yes, it's true, the term America First came from Reagan, but was it always played out in the right way? No, it wasn't. Why am I mentioning all of these flaws? I'm mentioning these flaws not to attack Reagan. Again, I admire Reagan. I like Reagan. I like him for what he is. But that's the problem. A lot of people for decades have not liked Reagan for who he is. They have liked him for the caricature that has been painted and dreamed up in the minds of people on the right about him, and then affixed to every political consideration that a conservative undertakes. This sort of deistic mythos is how a lot of people see Reagan. But in the same vein, if phenomena are purer than people, which they are, because ideas are ideas are not people. Ideas are manifest through people. Therefore, ideas are immaculate. The people that manifest them are not immaculate. So if we understand that, then maybe when the question is asked, should the right abandon Reagan? Maybe we should really ask, should the right abandon the ideas that he stood upon that he didn't live up to? And to that I say, no. The right should not abandon the idea that the government is one of the most dangerous and prolific enemies of the individual, of the family, and of freedom in our homeland at the moment. That was an idea that Reagan touted immensely. The right should not abandon the idea that there are moral absolutes that you can use when making political judgments. Reagan did that all the time. He called the USSR the evil empire. Now the problem is, when those moral absolutes become a tool to fund the pockets of people who don't care about those moral absolutes, but simply want to provoke war for profit or for whatever other messed up reason in their mind, that's not good. And we reject that. But to have a government or a president that is someone who believes in objective morality and is going to assert it in a morally consistent way, that's a good thing. Should conservatives reject the idea that the social domain and the political domain are two separate things? No, they shouldn't. They shouldn't. A lot of this talk of abandoning Reagan has nothing to do with Reagan. It has everything to do with rejecting the founding principles, not just of 1776, but also of the contemporary conservative movement. I'll give you guys a little bit of a history lesson before I let you go. In the 1950s, after going on a crusade against McCarthyism, a crusade with McCarthy and advancing McCarthyism, because there was an understanding that there were communists in the government at the time, William F. Buckley decided to found a magazine called National Review, which many of you may know. I mean, it's pretty popular. And this single magazine set the standard for decades upon decades of conservative ideology and understanding in America. Before National Review, there was not really a focus coming from Republicans or whatever, or conservatives, on limited government and the relationship between the state and man being restricted and all that kind of stuff. There was the old right in the 1920s, people like Albert J. Nock and others, who were against the Great Depression, who were against rather the welfare system that came on the basis of the Great Depression, who were against the progressive era. There were critics of progressivism prior to 1950. Of course there were. And Buckley took those critics, many of them, and incorporated their ideas and their works into this sort of ecumenical approach of what eventually became modern-day conservatism. He took people that were religious, people that were atheists, people that were libertarians, people that were traditionalists, and merged them together with this thing called fusionism. A fusionist conservative, in the Buckleyite sense, is someone who has a more socially conservative posture, but also they have, when it comes to government, they have a more sort of limited posture, a more classically liberal understanding of what government is supposed to be doing. That's what the original consensus was about. And the consensus was bound in the idea that it's time for conservatives to preserve the ideas of the American founding against communism and to reject communism as fiercely as possible. Well, what has happened? What's happened is there are people that were in this consensus that didn't actually believe the government should have a minor role in society, but believe that you can't separate state authority and government power from the promotion of virtue and the good, capital G, the good, which is a very old philosophical concept in modern society. And the fact that you've done these two things, according to this camp of people, means you have allowed vice to flourish in your society. These people are called the post-liberals. And the post-liberals, a group of them, created this missive a few years back, I was looking at this video, called Against the Dead Consensus, where they say that after the Trump era, it's obvious that the Buckley-based consensus, where all kind of people come together to fight against communism, no longer works. And in stating this, They say we have to move beyond this and create a political system ordered around the common good, ordered around the collective, as opposed to rejecting the collective as a means of actualizing moral ends and moral goals, their idea of moral and their idea of moral goals. And so there's been this conversation on the right. Well, should we tolerate homosexuality? Some people are asking that. Should we tolerate women dressing in a certain way? People are asking that. Should we tolerate surrogacy? People are asking that. Should we tolerate XYZ? A lot of folks are saying, oh, it's the 90s Christian conservatives coming back on the right and they're making a resurgence. No. What it is people that have an alien idea of what good politics and good society looks like, who wish to inflict that upon people who believe in American society. The problem with this post-liberal movement, and the problem with the anti-Reagan movement, which is not about Reagan, it's about the ideas of the founding. It's about the ideas of the founding of the country and American conservatism. The problem is they see problems. They see valid problems. They see the decay of culture. They see the dissolution of objective truth. They see social and moral anarchy. And they say it was the ideas of the founding. It was the ideas of original conservatism, the ideas of classical liberalism that actually got us here. Therefore, let's revolt against this. Let's go to a pre-Enlightenment disposition, and let's enact a collective form of ideal upon the rest of society. They want to use anti-American solutions for problems that can be solved through American solutions. That's what the issue is here. But the worldview is so different from this nation, from this experiment, that any attempt to enact these ideas would simply lead to harming the United States. I think that what the right should do, we have to talk more about culture. Reagan did talk about culture, but his policies weren't geared towards promoting a certain cultural agenda necessarily. Of course, there was the just say no, of course, but that was, I think, something that kind of just flamed up and died off. Reagan believed that it was the imperative of people, free people, to decide certain matters for themselves. But so many times these days, conservatives just stay right there, and we never go beyond that. We have to go beyond that. Small government is necessary, but it's not sufficient. The individual's autonomy and freedom is necessary and important to healthy political order, but it's not sufficient. If you're going to have a good political order, you need to have a good society. If you're going to have a good society, you need to be able to speak to the issues of the heart, not just the issues of the mind, because the heart is the guiding principle of so many of our behaviors and actions today, for good and for ill. I like the mind personally, but the heart is important too. You need both to be a full human being. But there aren't enough people, except those that wish to destroy America's founding ideas and convert us into this collectivist hellscape, this common good hellscape, who are talking about this. That's what we need to do. That's the agenda. So no, we don't abandon Reagan's ideas or whatever. We take a look at Reagan. We assess him logically. We don't worship him as a deity or as a deific figure. We see his limitations, and we respect him for what he is, and we also can see where he erred. That's how it should be for any political figure. No movement should be built around a cult of personality, because the moment that happens, you get similar situations as to what's happening now. We begin invoking the person, and by invoking the person as a poor way of seeing the ideas, we end up both rejecting the person and the ideas as if they are one package, as opposed to considering them separately as is logical, as is rational, and as is necessary for a thinking people. That's the problem. So instead of rejecting Reagan, let's reject all cult of personality. Let's look at everybody, every figure in history, for their merits, for their flaws. And let's assess our willingness to acknowledge them and respect them on the basis of how close they were to the right, capital R, on the basis of how close they were to virtue, and on the basis of what they inspire in our souls or don't inspire in our souls. Once we do that, I think these kind of questions and circumstances will not be nearly as important as we think they are. And I think finally there will become a more potent focus on ideas, principles, or personalities. That's my goal. Join the revolution of the mind, my friends. Like this video, comment on this video, share this video, subscribe to this channel. Also, donate to me if you want to support me. All the links are in the comment section down below. Please share this video with your friends. Get us out there. I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.